It's happened again. That Americans are reeling with grief, anger, and frustration after the shooting at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, where 2 teachers and 19 children were killed by a lone gunman. It's the deadliest school shooting since the Sandy Hook massacre a decade ago, and it has Trailblazer Wendy Wheatcroft fired up to accomplish what the federal government has failed to do: enact meaningful gun control laws that prevent violence. Wendy is a mother, a teacher, and a longtime gun safety activist. She is founder of San Diegans for Gun Violence Prevention and the former head of the California chapter of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. Wendy is getting ready to launch a political action committee called Safer California to raise money to support gun control policies and candidates. A survivor of gun violence herself, Wendy spoke to me from her Wisconsin farm.
Yes, let me start by just asking you, as a longtime gun safety advocates, what were your thoughts when you heard about this latest horrible massacre?
I was just gutted. I received the news in bits and pieces. I'm part of a nationwide group of gun violence prevention advocates, and we have a little secret Facebook group that we communicate in. So I usually find out about things way before they even hit the news. And I had heard there was an active shooter, and then I didn't hear anything. And then I heard that 2 people were dead. And then like an hour later, all of a sudden it was so many more people. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, I could believe it, but it gets very frustrating when you're doing this work and these things continue to happen. We know what prevents shootings. We know how to stop it, and we're not. And it's incredibly frustrating.
You had your own terrifying encounter with a gunman during your college years. Tell us about that.
One night I was just walking from the gym to my dorm. They were right across the street from each other. And there was a path in front of my dorm that was lined with very tall bushes. And I always felt very nervous walking through there because it just felt like nobody could see you in there. It felt like someone could hide in there. And, as young women, we're taught to be vigilant of our surroundings. And one night I was walking back to my dorm, and from behind, someone grabbed me by the mouth, and I felt as if they had a gun in my back and, said, "Don't scream, bitch, or I'll kill you." And I just froze in that moment. And I realized that part of his finger was in my mouth. And so I chomped down as hard as I could and kicked my foot back behind me. Fortunately, I had a stepdad that used to practice scenarios like that with my sister and I, like full on, physical practice. So I think, his lessons kicked in that moment, thank God. And I ran back into my dorm. But I was so terrified. I didn't even tell my roommate, who was my best friend from home. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell my parents, because I was afraid that since he got away, if I said something, he would find me again before anyone else could. I was 17 and not thinking fully as an adult. But I really crashed and burned that semester. I got very depressed. I had severe insomnia. I really couldn't even attend class. And I ended up coming home at Christmas time and transferring schools because I just didn't feel safe there.
And that's what brought you to San Diego.
I grew up in San Diego, so I just came right back home.
Yeah. So this was an personal encounter with gun violence, but there's something else that happened in your life that also kind of changed the trajectory of your career. You spent most of your career as a teacher, and you expected to do that pretty much for the rest of your life, I read. And
Yes.
then Sandy Hook happened, the massacre in Connecticut that resulted in so many deaths of young students. And that changed everything for you, didn't it?
It really did. I taught at a school for 12 years in Escondido, And prior to Sandy Hook, we had a number of real lockdowns. And I was young when I started teaching. I was 24 years old and really hadn't seen much outside of my own bubble where I grew up. And I saw a lot of things in that community where I was teaching. Kids lived very hard lives. They were poor. They lived with a lot of violence in their community, and it started to impact our school. And I spoke out about it. I kind of became like the mosquito in the ear of our administration at my school and at the district office. And I was constantly poo-pooed, like, oh, that's just what happens around here. It's fine, you know. And then when Sandy Hook happened, I was sitting in front of my first grade class. I had a first grade child at her own school. And it was almost like one of those moments where you just come up against the brick wall and you hit it and it makes sense. And I just thought, wow, you know, this isn't just happening in my school. I'm probably not the only teacher being silenced. This has to be happening more places. I was pregnant with my second child. And I just started to realize that I couldn't put myself in harm's way at the expense of my kid's mother. So I switched schools. I switched to a very affluent private school where they had gates and security, and I thought I would be safe there. And I had a situation with two dads at that school where their children had a beef. One dad decided to take matters into his own hands and drove around town looking for the other dad with his gun. And I was at home that night, and through the rumor mill grapevine of this small town, I started to get emails. And unfortunately, that week, I was also the administration on duty because our head of school was out of town. So I had to scramble the night before the next day to try to figure out how I was going to protect the entire school from this person. And I realized then, you know, it's not discriminating. Gun violence affects all of us in varying forms. And I really dove in deeper to learn more about that and more about what specific gun violence was happening in San Diego.
Well, I was surprised to hear, according to the governor's office in California, every day more than 100 Americans are killed with guns and 230 people are shot and wounded. I mean, it's clear that we must do something to curtail this gun violence. And I guess that's kind of where your advocacy started after this incident at your own school, right?
Yes, absolutely. And what I learned was, you know, those numbers can be divided up into other numbers. So for example, out of those 100 to 110 people who die every day, 7 to 9 of them are children. And it's often from accessibility of a loaded weapon in their own home. I learned that over 4.5 million children, I think the number's higher now since COVID, but 4.5 million children live in homes with unsecured weapons. And that is just a tragedy waiting to happen, not just for individual young children, but for teens at risk for suicide, for older folks developing dementia, for older folks like military veterans who are at risk for suicide, or just to be stolen and used in a crime. Hundreds of guns are stolen every single day because gun owners are not securing them.
And the statistics are shocking, and we all know about them. And yet it's been nearly 10 years since Sandy Hook. And here we have this latest massacre involving children. And they're hauntingly similar. And yet gun violence, despite being an epidemic in America, the federal government has not passed one federal law regarding gun control. That shocked me.
Yes, you know, we were told for a long time during the Trump years that nothing would pass because of the current administration, which is believable. But then we were also told by electing a new administration, which many of us worked our butts off to make happen, not just in the midterms, but in the presidential election years. And still they're being held back from being able to pass these laws because of the Senate. I mean, what do we have to do to make this happen? And I'm starting to lose faith, quite honestly. During COVID, we saw record numbers of gun sales based off fear, propagated by the gun lobby, instilling fear in people. And so Pandora's box has been opened so wide. I just don't know how we're ever going to be able to close it unless we can pass these federal laws, because state by state isn't cutting it anymore.
And the political divide is obviously preventing any action from happening. Foes of gun control say that gun legislation won't stop the mass shootings. Yet in California, where we have some of the strictest gun control laws in the country, the rate of gun violence has dropped dramatically since those regulations were imposed. And yet in other states like Texas and Florida, they've skyrocketed because their legislators have gone the other way.
Absolutely. States with stronger gun laws have fewer gun deaths, but we're also only as strong as our closest neighbor. California has very strong gun laws, but anyone can drive into Arizona or Nevada and buy a gun, basically no questions asked. The gun lobby loves to throw Chicago into the argument about gun laws because there are so many gun deaths in Chicago, but guess who their neighbor is? Indiana, which had their gun laws weakened by Mike Pence years ago. The gun lobby is way ahead of gun violence prevention groups, and we're just trying to play catch up. They've had almost a 20-year head start on, weakening state by state, getting people elected at lower levels to warm the bench and move up into higher levels of office. We have a lot of catching up to do.
It's interesting. It's been said that the ideology behind gun rights advocacy is not just strictly protecting the Second Amendment anymore, but gun owners, who tend to be more right-leaning in their political persuasion, they see gun ownership as part of their social identity in a way. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, over the years, America has, indoctrinated millions of young people via Fox News, via the NRA, chat rooms, YouTube. I could go on. And we have a real serious problem of toxic masculinity, where demasculated men feel that they need a gun to be manly. You can even link this to the jacked up large trucks. They're all connected to each other. And I don't really know how we can address this problem of toxic masculinity. Other countries don't have this problem, and they also don't arm this problem legally. But it's important to say, that not all gun owners are extremists. They say that the gun extremists equate for about 3% of the gun owning population. And these are folks that don't just have one gun to protect their family. They have 20 guns. They consider themselves collectors. I consider them hoarders. They hoard guns, they hoard ammo. What are they preparing for? They're preparing for something that the NRA has said is coming.
It's interesting that women's groups and mothers groups seem to be at the forefront when it comes to gun safety, yet statistics show 98% of shooters are men. What are men doing to prevent gun violence in this country?
I'll be honest with you, I've been pretty disappointed. We do have a number of men leading on this issue, at the heads of almost every national gun violence prevention organization. Even within Moms Demand Action, we have some really incredible men marching right alongside all of us. We call them Man Enough to Be a Mom. We have the whole name for them and stuff. But unfortunately, I haven't felt the support of men that we need. As a woman, we know that we're often not listened to. We're often gaslighted or made to feel like we're being hysterical or overreacting. And I think that having more men's voices in this fight would actually get through to some of the people that we need to get through to, because the toxic masculinity is so deep. They don't want to listen to women.
Well, let's talk about your organization that you're currently involved with. What are you doing? What progress have you made when it comes to gun control?
So with Moms Demand Action as an organization, we have really worked state by state to knock down bad NRA bills that they've been trying to pass. We have very active groups in every single state. And we've also begun to do more local work in the past couple of years to work at the local level with school boards and city councils to insulate our cities against the gun violence that's happening. But as we mentioned earlier, federally, we've made very little progress. I've progressed in my activism from, just getting my feet wet 6-7 years ago to becoming the Mom San Diego lead, to becoming the California chapter lead, to helping found San Diegans for Gun Violence Prevention. That then led me to run for office, which was an interesting experience. And I was tackling the gun lobby head on in that experience.
As a candidate for San Diego City Council District 7.
Yes, that's correct. And I really was running up against the gun lobby quite often during that time. It was very difficult. And since then, I've been trying to find my bearings post-COVID and, try to figure out what it is I wanted to do next. And a colleague of mine and I decided to start Safer California PAC. This is a way for us to raise money to support and even scout true gun violence prevention candidates, folks who have already been in the fight, very similar to me when I was a candidate, folks who had been in the gun violence prevention fight, who wanted to take their activism to the next level by running for office. I felt like I did not get the support that I needed, especially financially. As women, it's proven that when you run for office, you raise 50% of your male counterpart. And that number was exactly true for me. And not having money running a race makes it very difficult to win. It's expensive to reach voters. It's expensive to send mail. It's expensive to run ads. So through Safer California PAC, we want to scout and recruit and support candidates like I was, who are trying to win their races by supporting them behind the scenes.
And give us a laundry list, if you would, Wendy, of the wish list of what it would take to make gun violence, to curtail it in America.
We definitely need sweeping federal reform. We need to reinstate the assault weapons ban. We need to close the boyfriend and Charleston loopholes, which, enable folks that should not be able to buy weapons to do so. We need to pass a nationwide safe storage law that would require all gun owners to lock up their guns and ammo away from children and teens or folks at risk. We need a nationwide gun violence restraining order law, which we do have in California. This allows family members or even the police to remove firearms from someone who's deemed to be a risk to themselves or others. And I also think we need a nationwide ammunition purchase background check and limits on purchasing ammo. Nobody should be able to acquire an arsenal. Why? What is it needed for? The same thing happened with almost every mass shooting, and there should have been flags raised.
There's been so much frustration because we keep seeing this. It's like a bad movie playing over and over again. Are you hopeful that this latest horrible incident, massacre, will galvanize Americans to show up at the polls? And I mean, that's really our power, right?
It really is. And that's really where I've been pointing everyone. It's unfortunate every time there's a mass shooting, I get inundated with requests and, people want to join and people want to get involved. But sadly, that fades. I've seen it fade every single time. And it really hurts. It hurts to be working so hard and to try to help all these folks get more involved and then for them to stop. So I really hope people can use this fuel as fuel for their fire to keep going all the way to midterms, because we really have no time to waste. We really need to be voting out every single GOP member of Congress, Senate, and lower, or nothing's going to change.
June is National Gun Violence Awareness Month. How can people who want to get involved in the movement become involved? What's happening?
Nationwide, we have events all across the country, in almost every big city, and folks can get involved with Moms Demand Action for those events by texting the word ACT, A-C-T, to 64433. And what that does is it puts you into our system to be able to receive alerts and invitations to events happening within your area. We're fortunate to have a very deep database that allows us to specifically invite people to events in their area. I know people want to do something right now that doesn't feel like a lot, but we have a lot of work that we're already doing, and we just need people to fall in line. We will be having marches in cities across the country during Wear Orange Month. We will be turning cities orange. We've done that before in San Diego, where we've lit up the Museum of Man, now the Museum of Us, orange.
And orange is the color, we should explain, because orange is the color that first responders wear to be seen, right? So it's just
yes, hunters used to wear orange to be seen, and so it's for us to be seen. Do you see us? Because we're just begging and pleading for something to change. Another thing that people can do is to call their legislators every day. Be that mosquito in the ear. Whether they're a Dem or a Republican, they need to be hearing from every single one of us.
Wendy Wheatcroft, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and educating us, and for your efforts to prevent gun violence. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.